Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today we are very pleased to welcome a local author, lives right here in San Francisco. Her name is Michelle Richmond. She lives in the Richmond district, of course. And she has written a novel called The Year of Fog, published by Delacorte Press, and I welcome you and thank you for coming by.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Usually when people send me books and they have what they call blurbs on the back, I don't usually agree with too much of them, but your book has been marvelously blurbed in my opinion, starting with the one right at the top, Amanda Eyre Ward, who is the author of How to Be Lost. She says, in part, impossible to stop reading, even as I savored Michelle Richmond's rich prose and fascinating passages on photography and the nature of memory. I couldn't turn the pages fast enough. A missing child, a haunting neighborhood, a search for love. The Year of Fog has it all. And she's right. I mean, you do combine some very interesting and disparate elements and issues, if you will, and do it in a very compelling way, because you had but two purposes, you said at one time, probably when you were presenting this to your publisher, and you may have forgotten that you said this.
Possibly, we'll see.
You had two purposes in doing this book. You say, I wrote this book because I wanted to explore overpowering guilt from the perspective of someone whose mistake is one that anyone might make. For a few crucial seconds on what appears at first to be an ordinary day, the narrator stops paying attention. This error costs her and those she loves everything. What did she step away from?
I remember saying that. She turns away from Emma on the beach. Emma is a 6-year-old girl who's the daughter of our narrator, Abby's fiance.
Right.
They're walking together on Ocean Beach, and she turns away to look at a dead seal pup and to snap a picture of it. And that's the moment when everything in her life changes. And
this sends her on a quest really for at least two different things that I thought of when I was reading the book. The first, obviously, is to find the child. And then the second one is to understand memory better so that she can recall more of what happened, which might give her a clue as to where the child is. That's correct. She's in a situation where there are absolutely no clues. It's Ocean Beach. It's a foggy day. There's really no one around. There's nothing that might indicate what happened to Emma. And so she thinks that probably the best place to look is in her own memory, that the answer to what happened to Emma is hidden somewhere inside of her mind. And so she goes about trying to excavate her memory. And for me, it was really interesting writing the book, just sort of finding out how memory is held in our brains and how it's imprinted there and what we do with it and how accurate and, more importantly, how inaccurate it can be. Yeah, and the various theories through the ages of, quote, expert or philosophers, psychologists on the whole issue. And the other thing that comes across in the book is something that was very, very disturbing to me, and that is the kind of chilling nonchalance of a police investigation of a missing child. They have their prototype of investigation, and by God, they're going to stick to that. And then it's over for them. Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily coldness on their part so much as this idea that they have a certain way that they do things, and they have a way that they feel is the proven way to run a search. And so with a missing child, of course, every minute matters and every hour and every day. And so the farther you get away from it in time, the less likely you are to find the child. And the police know this. And also, since it was on the beach, they assume, it's Ocean Beach, she must have drowned. And so they're not entirely motivated to continue the search. Yeah, they kind of assume right away, water, beach, boom, undertow, gone. And that brings us to the other thing that you promised to do in the book. I also intended the book to be a sort of love letter to my adopted city, San Francisco. Where are you adopting it from? I grew up in Alabama. Oh, on another coast. I grew up on the Gulf Coast. completely different coast, I would say. It is a moody and beautiful city, you say, this San Francisco, rich with hidden landscapes that tourists rarely see. I hope I have brought some of its mystery and magic to the page. And I think you did. I think you did. The two neighborhoods that, Abby and
Jake
live in, especially those, and then all the haunts and the restaurants and the possibilities and the cafes, the difficulty or the non-difficulty of getting around the fog. It's wonderful if you live here. I'll tell you that. It was just great.
Well, I live in the outer Richmond, and I think when people think of San Francisco, the outer Richmond and the Sunset, which is where Jake lives, isn't something they think of. I mean, a lot of people have never even seen it, and so.
The Year of Fog focuses on one of the most courageous women in current fiction. More about her when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
The Year of Fog is the title. It's a novel by Michelle Richmond, published by Delacorte Press. And Andrew Sean Greer had this to say about it. Profound, deeply moving, endlessly gripping. You will devour The Year of Fog in a weekend and turn it over to begin again. I don't know about turning it over to begin again, but the devour part, that really works. No, it is because of the simple, compelling nature of the plot. Once you get on board, you want to know what's going to happen. You want to know if the child is going to be found at all, going to be found dead or alive or anything like that. And one of the reasons the Year of Fog is so gripping is the simplicity of and power of the plot. But the other thing is that Abby Mason, she's unbelievably strong. She's wonderful. Where did she come from? Is she modeled on anybody that you've ever known?
She is not, although I will say I did kind of steal her name. I have an aunt named Alice Mason, and I had her name Abigail, and I was looking for a last name, and for some reason my aunt's last name popped into my mind. But she, the character herself is not modeled on anyone that I know specifically, but the idea behind the character, I guess, is I was thinking, so what would happen? I mean, it's the most terrible thing that can happen. A child disappears. And so what would... how would this character respond to that? And my feeling was that it would be something that you simply couldn't go on with your life. I mean, nothing. It seems to me that nothing would make sense after that happened until you had found the child. And
precisely, but the power of the character is that she goes on, and she's told by everybody, forget it, pull away. The police say it's over. Blah, blah, blah. And she keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. And, ultimately is, ready and leaves the country to continue the search.
Yeah. So,
Jake Balfour, I mean, I wrote in my note here, this is a terrible thing to say, no match for Abby. That's what I wrote. And that's a man's note about the leading male character. I don't know. What do you think? Well,
Jake is, just to fill the listeners in a little bit, he's a school teacher. He's Abby's fiance, and he at the beginning of the search, he's very gung-ho and he's very rational about how he goes about the search. He sets up a command post in the Castro, in an empty shop space, and
lots of posters.
And he gets hundreds of volunteers. He has millions of posters. He goes on the radio. He goes on television. And after a few months, he begins to believe what the police are telling him, which is that Emma simply isn't alive anymore. And I think Jake pulls away from the search because as her father, he absolutely can't imagine the terror of her still being alive, because in many ways that's worse than if she's gone.
You have him expressing this beautifully. He says at one point, I'm feeling like my life is over, he said, his back to me. I'm feeling like I've done everything I know to do, and none of it has worked. I'm feeling like whatever my baby is going through, if she's even still alive, I can't do a goddamn thing to help her. And that's the father's angst, the father's grief. So I shouldn't be so hard on him.
But that's interesting. Other readers have told me that too, that they had kind of a negative reaction to Jake because they want him to continue the search in, as relentlessly as Abby does. We all deal with things of different ways, and his way of dealing with it is that, he decides to take the most rational track, which is she really must be gone, and now I'm going to get on with my life. And Abby's not able to do that. Well,
the thing to remember is that the incident itself, that the child disappearing, tears their relationship asunder. So, are they partners anymore? Are they lovers? Or what are they? And they're often on all of those things: partners, lovers, and strangers. And there you are. There's a next door neighbor here that I love. I don't even know that she has a last name.
Nell Novotnoy.
Oh, yes. Nell Novotnoy. Now, Nell is a librarian and a wonderful person, a great sharer of books. She works at the library, and she's the one that keeps bringing Abby books on memory.
Yes, Nell works at the Mechanics Institute Library in San Francisco, and she, she wants to do something for Abby, but she doesn't know what she can do. But the one thing that she can do for her is bring her information. And she says, Abby, it's somewhere in your mind. We're just going to figure out how to find it. And so she's bringing her these books by Aristotle and Flood,
she
essays by Aristotle. Yeah,
she reads from them. Here, I got a new book. Wait till you hear this. And it's on memory. Well, what memory is a really central here. It works as a constructive process that not only reproduces but filters, changes, and interprets the past. And that's what Abby's dealing with. Critics say that The Year of Fog is beautifully written. We'll prove that when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. It is Conversations on the Coast. The book is The Year of Fog. The author is Michelle Richmond, and the happy publisher is Delacorte Press. And a woman that we've interviewed on this show had the good sense to say nice things about your book. One, Islet Waldman, author of Love and Other Impossible Pursuits, which is the one we did. Michelle Richmond is that marvelous thing, she says, a writer who can craft a gorgeous sentence and also create a plot so propulsive that it hurts to put the book down, even for a minute. That's a great word, propulsive, because that really is the feeling that you get, that I've got to keep going. I got to find out what's going to happen to this girl and what's going to happen to Abby and what's going to happen to this relationship. The thing is that but I insist that one of the compelling propulsive forces in this book is Abby. I know what my girl. Now, there are many parts in this book that we could read. There's a scene where the father, Jake, is going to the coroner's office because a body has been found about the age and dimensions of his daughter. And he's telling this to Abby. I drove as slowly as I could. But I got there. Of course I got there. Of course it was open, and I'm sitting there in the parking lot of the coroner's office thinking that I can't possibly do this. I can't possibly walk into that building and look at the body of a girl who may be Emma. But I went. I shut my brain down, and I just went. What choice did I have, really? On the outside, it's just a plain white building, pleasant even, with bougainvillea climbing the walls and nice benches positioned in the entryway, but on the inside it looks like a hospital, all white and sterile. It smelled even worse than it looked, a mixture of ammonia and some cloyingly sweet human smell. not like body odor, but something else, something worse. It only occurred to me later as I was driving home that what I'd been smelling was death. Death really does have a smell. That makes your skin crawl. That's very, very good. And you are very even-handed with Jake in that sense. I mean, this is, natural enough and beautifully described. There's another passage where Abby works on the distinction between loving a child versus loving a man.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And this is one of the, the continuing conflicts in the book. To love a man is one thing, she thinks, but to love a child is something else entirely. It is all-consuming. Before Emma, when people talked about the kind of love a child could provoke, I did not believe them. Then Emma came along, and now I can't imagine living the rest of my life without her. Maybe love is a divining rod that seeks out the people who need you most. When I first began to fall for Jake, I saw Emma as part of the package. Now, she has moved from the periphery to the center. Because that's what little girls will do.
Yeah.
I guess, huh?
Yeah, as a grandpa, right?
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
I know.
And, that's part of, I think, that's a choice that Abby has to make when she decides to continue the search and Jake doesn't want to. Is she going to lose Jake in order to search for Emma? And she ultimately chooses to do just that.
Yeah.
Because she can't give up on Emma.
So that saying there that the child is going to be in first place is really what happens.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other things you talk about is taking photos. And what does that mean? And in this day of, photo phones and things.
Yeah.
We take pictures because we can't accept that everything passes. We can't accept that the repetition of a moment is an impossibility. We wage a monotonous war against our own impending deaths, against time that turns children into that other, lesser species, adults. We take pictures because we know we will forget. We will forget the week, the day, the hour. We will forget when we were happiest. We take pictures out of pride, desire to have the best of ourselves preserved. We fear that we will die, and others will not know that we live. Click, click, click. Where did you find that? That's great.
Well, thank you. I think, part of that is just the personal experience of looking at photographs from my own childhood and seeing this person that I hardly recognize that was myself as a child, and then seeing my mother, my father in those pictures, and my sisters, and realizing that those moments that I see in those pictures are something that I don't remember at all, and possibly my mother does, and my mother still talks about having very vivid memories of us at that time. But now I have a son of my own who's 2.5 years old, and I think about how vivid all of these early months of his life are to me, that when he's 20 years old he'll have absolutely no recollection.
You've got to capture it. We've been having a very nice chat here today with Michelle Richmond. The title of her book, Year of Fog. I suggest you go out and buy a couple of copies. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.